Good day, I'm Teacher Nino, and welcome to Learning Module 1 in Health 9, 4th quarter. Lesson 1. Beware, be aware. Let's begin with the concept of injuries. In our first lesson, you will define the word injury and discover its two classifications, namely intentional and unintentional injuries. Then you will focus on intentional injuries and their different types. You will also learn about the characteristics and effects of the different violent acts and behaviors leading to intentional injuries. Are you excited to learn? Before we proceed, take note of the objective for this lesson. Then proceed with the first activity. Objectives. At the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to A. Differentiate intentional injuries from unintentional injuries. And B. Describe the types of intentional injuries. Activity 1. News Bulletin. Read the news headlines below, then classify them as to whether they refer to intentional or unintentional injuries. Write your answer in table form on your worksheet. A sample table is provided below. Then answer the guide questions. Number 1, explain how you classified each news headline. And number 2, how did you distinguish between intentional and unintentional injuries? So, ang nakalagay dito, estudyante nagpakamatay matapos mabuli. Yun by intentional or unintentional. Teenager, rape and slain. Binatilyo patay matapos tamaan ng kidlat. Riot ng mga gang, naawi sa madugong wakas. Bata nalunod sa baha. Karambola ng sasakyan, 7 ang sugatan. Sunog sa Quezon City. Mula sa napabayaang kandila. Girl 7 kidnapped in QC. Neophyte patay sa hazing. Sikyok nasagasaan dahil sa sobrang kalasingan. So, alin kaya dyan ang intentional at unintentional? Now that you can tell the difference between intentional and unintentional injuries, let's focus on intentional injuries. Unscramble the phrases to form the meaning. Sa left side, meron po tayong intentional injuries, then intended to, injuries in, types of, which some, harm was, occurred. So our lesson is all about intentional injuries, types and characteristics, part 1. The definition of self-inflicted is something that you bring upon yourself or cause to have happened to you. Suicide is the intentional taking of one's own life. So, walang kinalaman ng ibang tao, kagagawan mo ang nangyari. So, meron pa dito, many of those who attempt suicide do not receive mental and emotional counseling because their families try to hide the problem because they are ashamed of it. Trivia. So, nag-search ako sa Guinness World Record. Highest death toll from mass suicide in ancient times. Pero, mas na-curious ako dito in modern times. Nakalagay dito, the greatest mass suicide was on 18 November 1978 when 913 members of the People's Temple cult died of a mass cyanide poisoning. At Jonestown, Newport, Kaitoma, Guyana. So, ang nakalagay dito, the greatest mass suicide. So, hinanap ko yung lead. At ito nga, ang pangalan ng leader niya, ng People's Temple na yon ay si Jim Jones. So, nag-search ako. Mayroon siyang nabasa sa Bible na hindi mamamatay, hindi sila mamamatay kahit uminom sila ng lason. Kaya ang ginawa niya, ginather niya yung mga ah, followers niya sa isang lugar, tapos sabay-sabay silang uminom ng cyanide. So yung cyanide po na yun ay ginamit noon ni Hitler dun sa camp niya, concentration camp. Bata, matanda, pati siya patay. Yun yung the greatest mass suicide. On the other hand naman po, a suicide attempt in which a person does not intend to die is called parasuicide. It is often a cry for help, meaning the person wants others to know what he/she is feeling. Despite this, parasuicide should be taken seriously because it may also lead to death. How will you recognize a person who has suicidal tendencies? Oftentimes, the person gives clues through his/her behavior and speech, and some of these clues may be talking about suicide or death, writing farewell letters, or giving away valuable things to their friends and siblings, and showing changes in behavior, moods, and feelings. Hindi naman siya dating ganun. Bigla-bigla na lang nagbago. Domestic violence is an act that includes physical assault, hitting, pushing, shoving, etc. Sexual abuse, unwanted or forced sexual activity, and verbal abuse. These are behaviors that are used by one person in a relationship who tries to control the other. Domestic violence includes abuse and actions such as name-calling or put-downs, keeping a partner from contacting his/her family or friends, withholding money, allowance, or denying financial support, stopping a partner from getting or keeping a job, actual or threatened physical harm, sexual assault, stalking, intimidation. Now, who are the possible victims of domestic violence? Anyone can be a victim or is at risk of it, especially if his or her partner is very jealous and or spies on him or her, will not let him or her break off the relationship, hurts him or her in any way, is violent, or brags about hurting other people, puts him or her down, or makes him or her feel bad, forces him or her to have sex or makes him or her afraid to say no to sex, abuses drugs or alcohol, rather, pressures him or her to use drugs or alcohol, has a history of bad relationships and blames it on others. Bullying. Bullying is an unwanted, aggressive behavior. The behavior is repeated or can be repeated over time. Both kids who are bullied and who bully others may have serious, lasting problems. Now, in order to be considered bullying, the behavior must be aggressive and include an imbalance of power. Kids who bully use their power, such as physical strength, access to embarrassing information, or popularity, to control or harm others. Repetition. Bullying behavior happen more than once or have the potential to happen more than once. There are different classifications of bullying. These are verbal bullying, saying or writing mean and nasty things. It includes teasing, name-calling, making inappropriate sexual comments, taunting, threatening to cause harm. So, nung elementary ako, ang kalimitan pangtukso ng mga klase, pambuli ba ay yung ilong, yung kulay ng balat, negro, pangu, kaya meron na naman tayong trivia time. Trivia about the nose. Okay, ito ay galing sa scientificamerican.com. The shape of a nose, Joan Raymond, September 1, 2011. Researchers in Germany recently showed that individuals from cold, dry climates, such as Greenland or Siberia, had higher and narrower nasal cavities than those from hot, humid climates such as Papua New Guinea or Gabon. So itong team na to ay gumamit sila ng computer-aided measurements of the nasal cavities sa 100 skulls representing 10 human groups living in 5 different climates. So, natuklasan nila na may kinalaman ang klima. Ito, this narrowing of the nasal passage enhanced contact between the air and the mucosal tissue, which helps to warm and humidify that air. So, nakakatulong pala yung mahabang ilong pagpapa-warm ng malalanghap mong hangin para hindi ka magkasakit. Ito nga yung sabi dito sa baba, proper heating and humidification of air in colder climates are important for respiratory health. So, wag na tayo magtaka kasi tayo ay Asian. Talagang hindi ganun kaganda ng ilong, ng mga ilong natin. Nasa klima pala yun. Oh. Social bullying. Social bullying, sometimes referred to as relational bullying, hurting someone's reputation or relationships. It includes telling other children not to be friends with someone, spreading rumors about someone, embarrassing someone in public. Physical bullying, hurting a person's body or destroying his or her possessions. It includes hitting, kicking, pinching, spitting, tripping, pushing, taking or breaking someone's things, making mean or rude hand gestures. Cyberbullying, verbal and social bullying done through use of technology and electronic means. It includes using social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc., using mobile devices, cell phone, using electronic mails, emails. Now we proceed to activity 2. How safe am I? Copy the chart in your worksheet. Then complete this by putting a check mark to the column that corresponds to your answer. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a problem with? So ito yung mga lalagyan nyo ng never, rarely, sometimes, often. First is name calling, bullying or intimidation, sexual harassment, gang-related violence, mistreatment or disrespect towards other people, threats of weapons, physical fights, and corporal punishment. Then, answer the guide question, the number 1 question. is what did you do in the situations that you have experienced? Number two, what do you feel towards the people who were responsible for these acts and behaviors? And number three, what could you have done to prevent these violent actions and behaviors from happening to you? And for our summative assessment, the direction is true or false. Write true if the statement is correct and false if incorrect. Number one, bullying is common in schools. Hmm. Number two, domestic violence occurs in all cultures, communities, and classes. Number three, a person who failed in his or her attempt to commit suicide will never try to do it again. Number four, accidents are considered intentional injuries. And number five, rape can only happen to females. Reflection. Write a reflection on the things you learned in this lesson and their relevance to you. Tell how you can apply what you learned in your daily life. And that's all for the part one of the unintentional injuries. And this is your teacher, Nino, saying ciao.